What's up, YouTube? Today we're going to be looking at the Open Great League, and the team that we're going to be taking a look at today is SCIZOR, Credility, and Azumarill. I've had enough. This Pokemon is absolutely everywhere. It's so good, and it's so good for such a good reason. Its fast move pressure is absolutely insane. It still has great pacing to both the Night Slash and the Trailblaze, but it's extremely glassy. So when you're taking a look at it in the one shield scenario, like we're taking a look at here, it doesn't look all that great, but this thing is an absolute beast in the two shield scenario, which is why we're pairing it with two very bulky Pokemon in the back that can deal with the majority of its weaknesses. SCIZOR, of course, has one weakness, and it's a double weakness to fire. So we have two answers to fire in the back with Acid, Credility, and Azumarill, which both have play into some of others of SCIZOR's awkward matchups. That said, before we hop into the battles, I want to say a special thank you to expert trainer members on this channel, Benny Hemlock, Dr. Green Mustache, and Soham Patil, as well as the legend trainer members on this channel, Big Burden, Andrew Pitten, Musachu, Noodleman, Speedster, Esteros, and Liminal Lagomorph. So without further ado, let's hop into some battles. Alright, into the first match, we have a Corviknight, which is actually a core breaker in the very first match, which is pretty unfortunate. But we still have a huge pacing advantage in these matchups, and Night Slash is still neutral, so we will connect with the first Night Slash, and we get the boost on Night Slash #1, so we get instantly bailed out of a bad matchup, and suddenly what went from a bad matchup is actually a good matchup, because their sand attacks do absolutely nothing, and now that I got one boost, I'm guaranteeing that I get a second boost. Yes, this is double resisted, but with the boost, it picks up the knockout on the Corviknight, and now we're 3 times boosted. These bullet punches are resisted, but they do not look it. In comes the Gastrodon, only to be met with a Trailblaze. They're going to be forced to shield this, and SCIZOR has run through 1.5 Pokemon on their team, and we have an even shield scenario. So now I can align with Credility. You might notice that the quality of these first few matches aren't as great. These were taken from my stream, and the last battles, like the last set or whatever, will be better quality. That said, a Bastiodon comes into the Credility, and I'm in a pretty awkward spot here because I need to chip this down into range where I can bubble farm down with my Azumarill. So I'm going to connect with 2 Grass Knots, and then I'm going to go for a catch and a sneak on the Azumarill. Getting that bubble through, that super effective damage, is extremely important, and now I'm hoping, can I get the full bubble farm down, take another charge move, and come out with 2 moves loaded? It looks like that's what my opponent was worried about. They end up switching. I preserved all of my energy. Play Rough will grab the final shield from my opponent. I make it to Play Rough #2. This is enough for the Earth Power here. However, we can live this. Azumarill is extremely bulky. Here comes a Play Rough. This probably knocks out the Gastrodon from this range, and now we can pivot into our Credility. We can take any one charge move here. I'm not too worried about it. Stone Edge, Flamethrower, doesn't matter. They do go for the better damage per energy move. I'm overfarming as much as possible, making sure that I can put them into Grass Knot range, and Grass Knot is neutral. It picks up the knockout on the Bastiodon, and we are able to take the win. Into next match, fantastic lead. We've got SCIZOR into Togetic. The opponent is going to safe switch into Primeape, and they are going to be met with Azumarill. Now, this is a matchup that Primeape can actually flip, just because it has such a pacing advantage, and these Rage Fists really start adding up. And you can already see this happening, as they're already at Rage Fist #2 before I even fire off my second charge move, and I was pretty quick on the switch. But now, I'm realizing I don't really need switch in this matchup. I've got an Acid Credility with Rock Tomb. That's a fine matchup into a Togetic. So you know what? I'm going to give my opponent switch. The only way they can knock out here is with a close combat. They actually do full send the close combat, and now back in comes the SCIZOR. Only 2 bullet punches to pick up the knockout. What's in the back? It is a Shadow Dugtrio. So not your typical Kanto Marowak that you might see, but a Dugtrio instead. They're going to give up 2 shields before I even give up 1, but now this is where we start shielding, because now I can shield up all these charge moves, get a nice energy lead for the Togetic that comes back in, but they actually make a really nice catch of a Grass Knot where it is resisted onto the Togetic. That is entirely my fault. I should definitely wait the turn to make sure I see that Mud Slap go through instead of throwing it on alignment. But my opponent capitalizes off my mistake. They get the catch, but I'm still able to overfarm here, go for the Rock Tomb because I had 2 shields left. This Rock Tomb will be enough to pick up the knockout, but they're 1 away from the charge move, so I throw 1 Acid. I get the catch of the Mud Bomb onto the Shadow SCIZOR. completely sacrificing it. Mud Bomb picks up the knockout, and now I can outpace, make it to the Grass Knot, and Grass Knot is super effective damage. It will pick up the knockout on the Doug Trio, and we are able to take that win. Into next match, we've got SCIZOR into Giratina. So what seems like should be a good lead of a Steel into a Dragon is actually more neutral than you might expect, because they have Shadow Claw and Ominous Wind, or Shadow Ball. So fortunately we do have a pacing advantage, so I will just go for the Night Slash on the CMP tie with their Ominous Wind. They shielded up, so I'm going to shield right back, and I'm going to basically do the exact same thing, over farming just a little bit, going for the Night Slash. My opponent ends up making a really nice catch onto a Primeape, but now Primeape will be aligned to the Azumarill, and we've seen how this matchup plays out before, but this is not the 2-shield scenario, this is the 1-shield scenario. So I'm basically just going to overfarm in this matchup, go for the Ice Beam in order to pick up the knockout, and then I still have a Fairy type that has play into their Giratina. They end up shielding up that Ice Beam, which is a bit of an odd play because there's nothing they can do to flip switch in this matchup. Even if they're at the back-to-back Rage Fist, or even a close combat plus a Rage Fist, it would not be enough. They end up coming in with a Golisopod. They are completely walled here, but I'm going to chip with the Play Rough, and now in comes Credilli. I don't want to take a super effective X-Scissor, so I will actually commit the shield on the very first X-Scissor, and then I'm going to overfarm as much as possible here and go for the Rock Tomb right before they make it to X-Scissor number 2. This will be enough to pick up the knockout, and now we have a full HP Credilli against a low HP Giratina and a low HP Primeape. Giratina is going to come back in. They do have enough for the Shadow Ball, and that's exactly what they're going to do, but I'm going to commit to the farm down. Can I get the Acid farm down? The answer is no. My opponent is going to throw their energy, but that's fine. Forcing them to throw their energy is honestly more important than getting the knockout. So now in comes the Azumarill for the bubble farm down. They end up sniping with the Primeape. Primeape does have enough for a Rage Fist. This will be enough to, actually not even enough to pick up the knockout, but now we can snipe with a SCIZOR, get the Bullet Punch farm down. We'd be able to Bullet Punch farm down the Giratina, so they just resign the match. Tough lead in the next match. Bullet Punch is resisted into the Stunfisk, and they have kind of a pacing advantage. So I end up going for a Mud Bomb catch, but I'm unsuccessful. I end up switching into Credilli, but I am met with a Drifblim, and Drifblim is not an answer to an up energy Credilli, and right away my opponent shows that by shielding up the first move. I can live an Icy Wind here, so I am going to let this go, especially after I lower their attack, and I can get to a second Rock Tomb, and this is just Shadow Drifblim. So will they commit a double shield? They will. That is actually crazy. They really are fighting for switch here, but committing 2 shields in this matchup is not really where you want to be, and I banked a Night Slash from earlier, so they're not going to get any of this energy. Night Slash now will be enough to pick up the knockout. They lose all of that energy. Back in comes the Stunfisk, but now I'm just going to double shield my SCIZOR and pick up the knockout with a Trailblaze. They're already at the back-to-back charge moves, but I can shield this up, getting a Bullet Punch through every single time they throw their energy. And now can I outpace, make it to the Trailblaze? It looks like I can by a singular turn, or 2 turns technically. Trailblaze, not quite enough to pick up the knockout. I am forced to switch into my Azumarill. I get the bubble through, so that will KO, but I'm forced to take a Mud Bomb. My opponent did not react in time, and it's Golisopod in the back, and Golisopod is not getting through an Azumarill plus a SCIZOR, so they resign the match. Decent lead in the next match. We've got SCIZOR into Azumarill. My opponent is going to safe switch into a Fortress, and this is a difficult matchup because I do not have a good answer to Fortress in the back. So I'm forced to stay in, and once again, getting bailed out of this matchup. We throw the Night Slash, we get the 2x boost, and now suddenly, what went from a bad matchup is a good matchup. So I'm going to go for the Night Slash boost right away. And we get a second boost. Can my opponent get to a second charge move? They can, but I want switch, so I am going to shield this up. I'm going to connect with a boosted Night Slash against whatever comes back in. Nope, never mind, I'm not. The Azumarill is going to come in, but now I can come in with my Credilli. In comes a SCIZOR, and my opponent is double Bug Steel in the back, and this is difficult because I don't have a good answer to these Bug Steals in the back. However, Azumarill does have neutral play here with both Bubble and Water resisting Steel, so it neutralizes that Bullet Punch coverage. We connect with a Play Rough and actually Bubble farm down the SCIZOR, and now it's going to be a matchup between Credilli and Azumarill. And fortunately for me, I know I can survive 1 Ice Beam from this range. My opponent for some reason goes for a Play Rough. That is definitely the wrong move to go for unless they're on Hydro Pump. And they think they need 2 moves, but that allows me to get to the Grass Knot. Not quite enough to KO, but I have a pacing advantage. So now here comes a Rock Tomb, and Rock Tomb from this range picks up the knockout on the Azumarill, and we are able to take that win. Shadow Scizor into Moltres. So how do we want to play this out? Because this is actually not a great lead because both of our charge moves are walled. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to farm up to the Trailblaze, bank it, and switch into my Credilli. Just so happens at the same time my opponent gets to a fly, and we end up getting a catch onto my Credilli, but I am instantly hard punished. So far we've hard lost lead and hard lost switch. But I can tank any one charge move here. Close combat would pick up the knockout, but I didn't expect my opponent to immediately lower their defense. So I do just let that go. I connect with a Rock Tomb. That actually does some pretty sizable chip to the Berserker despite its resistance. And because I banked a charge move from earlier, I can instantly come back in, win CMP, connect with the Night Slash. Is my opponent going to let this go? No, they're going to commit the shield. And it looks like they actually went for the extra Shadow Claw, but that's okay because I would still be able to outpace. They're actually on foul play, so they get to the foul play at the same time I get to the second Night Slash. But once again, that's okay. I think after this Night Slash grabs the final shield, which it does, I'm just gonna let this go. Even though I got the boost, Scizor is too low. It doesn't have play in the lead. I just basically need to go for a bubble farm down and come out loaded with energy for that Moltres that comes back in. They do make it to a Trailblaze, unfortunately, so I do have to give up my final shield. But now I can get the full bubble farm down. But instead, my opponent's going to pivot, and they're going to pivot into a Whiscash in the back. So Mudboy plus Flyer. Common core that we see pretty frequently, and Whiscash will be able to outpace here. Mud Bomb, not going to be too much damage here. They end up going for a Scald, maybe trying to fish for the lowering of the attack, but they do not get it, which is huge because now I can pick up the knockout with the Play Rough here. I'm not sure they're quite in range. No, they actually live on 1 HP, which is pretty unfortunate. Now they will be able to connect with a Mud Bomb for some solid chip, and that's exactly what they're going to do. Are they going to come back in with the Moltres? If they are, we have to watch for a catch here. We're only 2 away from the Ice Beam. There's 1 bubble. Here's 2. They go for the catch. We go for the overfarm. And now, just to go add insult to injury, I go for good timing there. 1 more bubble plus the Play Rough. Play Rough picks up the knockout on the Moltres, and we are able to take that win. Into the next match, we've got Scizor into Talonflame. Doesn't get worse than this. I'm going to throw 1 Bullet Punch, pivot into my Credilli, and defer that Incinerate damage. They end up going for a catch onto their own Credilli, but they are unsuccessful, and their Credilli is on Bullet Seed. So both of us hitting for neutral damage with our fast moves. They end up throwing on Alignment though, which means that I get a full acid in for free, and now suddenly, even though they have better pacing, it doesn't matter because letting a free fast move in means that I can outpace. So even though my opponent will be able to get to a charge move here, I know because I've lowered their attack twice, 1 Rock Tomb is not going to be enough to pick up the knockout. Had they gone for a Grass Knot, maybe it would have picked up the knockout, but they just go for the Rock Tomb, and now Rock Tomb from my end actually grabs a shield. My opponent doesn't want to give up switch. Can I get to another Rock Tomb? I can. These Bullet Seeds are doing absolutely no damage. Can I grab a second shield from my opponent? I can. That is absolutely massive. They're fighting for switch pretty hard. And now I can get the Bullet Punch through. That will KO the Credilli, and I know I can live a 4 times lowered Rock Tomb very comfortably, even on the Shadow Scizor. Once again, throwing 1 Bullet Punch, pivoting now into my Azumarill to defer the Incinerate. I will respect a Brave Bird here. It is just a Fly. Fly will get shielded up. Here comes another charge move. This should just be another Fly, so this time I will let it go because I do not know what's in the back quite yet, and it's a Lapras. Now, Lapras will be met with a Play Rough. And now I just have to constantly watch for my switch timer because as soon as they start throwing energy, my switch timer will be up and I can come back in with my Scizor and potentially put it into Play Rough range with these Bullet Punches. Can I get there? Can I get to the Trailblaze? It's going to be close, and no, I cannot, but that's actually better for me because if I picked up the knockout, they would get farm on their Talon, and I can't have that. So I'm going to let that go. I put it into Play Rough range, and now I can fire off the Play Rough, and they have to get to back-to-back moves, but they just dumped all of their energy, which means they're going to need at least 4 more Incinerates worth of energy in order to get to back-to-back moves. There's 3, there's 4, but I am able to outpace, make it to the Ice Beam, and Ice Beam from this range picks up the knockout on the Talonflame, and we are able to take that win. Into next match, another Moltres. So exact same game plan as the last one. I'm going to throw 7 bullet punches and then pivot into my Credilli. This one doesn't throw as soon as they get to the charge move, which is the right play because now they can overfarm significantly and go for a Brave Bird. Brave Bird from this range puts the Credilli into the deep red, but the reason I don't shield that is because I know I can live it and I can still get off energy to whatever comes back in, and there was no way I was flipping switch against a Clodsire either way. They are going to get the full Poison Sting farm down. I'm going to come in with the Scizor, now connecting with the Trailblaze here on the CMP tie. It looks like, oh nope, my opponent just did not throw their energy, but after connecting with that Trailblaze, I basically just have to count, make sure I can not get the farm down, it looks like, so I'm just going to have to settle for a Night Slash in order to pick up the knockout. Throwing on the CMP tie, it does pick up the knockout. Are they going to come back in with the Moltres? No, they're going to come in with their third, which is a Shadow Quagsire. Quagsire now will be met with a Trailblaze. This grabs the first shield from the opponent, and now in comes Azumarill, but my opponent pivots into their Moltres. And now I'm thinking Sucker Punch is resisted. The hardest hitting move they have left is a Brave Bird, so I will shield this up. They full send the Brave Bird. That's going to allow me to get a very comfortable bubble farm down, come out loaded with energy, and they have to get to like 2 Stone Edges here in order to pick up the knockout, or maybe plus some. I don't know. The mud shots might put me in range, but it's going to be close. Here comes play rough number 1. Can we grab the final shield? We can. Can we get to a second play rough? Yes, we can. Throwing kind of on alignment there, just making sure I get off this energy. Play rough connects, 1 more bubble, going for the catch of the Stone Edge onto my Scizor. That is absolutely game winning if we couldn't survive that Stone Edge, but now we will be able to bubble farm down the Quagsire, and we are able to take that win. Shadow Scizor into Credilli, finally a good lead. We're definitely going to stay in this matchup. Bullet punches are super effective, and the opponent is staying in, and we already have them at the half health range without even throwing a charge move. I'm going to shield up the Rock Tomb. In comes that Mag Cargo. I instantly pivot into my Azumarill. Didn't even take 1 Incinerate's worth of damage, which is massive there because that would do way too much damage. They're going to connect with a Rock Tomb, but it looks like 2 is not quite enough to pick up the knockout. I'm now going to go for the play rough on good timing, which is 3 bubbles, which is 9 turns as opposed to 10 turns from 2 Incinerates. Of course, play rough and Ice Beam both resisted in this matchup, but that's fine. I can take a second Rock Tomb, and I will still be able to get the bubble farm down and come out with a little bit of energy. Yes, this energy is debuffed, but we can get off a little bit of chip on whatever comes back in. Is it going to be their lead? No, it's going to be a Jellicent, which is their third in the back. I'm now going to connect with a play rough, and then I'm going to instantly reset and save my Azumarill for later, because I know I can just come in with my Credilli, knowing that their Credilli was energy dry. So by coming with my Credilli, they would always be behind on energy. So I knew it was safe pivoting into my Credilli because this is also a water Pokemon against the grass. They end up trying to call the bait there as their only win con. Unfortunately for my opponent, I do not bait, so we are going to take that match. Into the next match, we've got Shadow Scizor into Marowak. Now, what I like to do in this matchup is actually pivot into my Credilli and try and bait out whatever is in the back, because I don't want to take a lot of neutral Mud Slap damage without getting too much value out of it. And I think that this is the best way to play it out, because I can connect with a Grass Knot. My opponent doesn't even try to call the bait. They shield it. That's fine. I can shield right back and then grab a shield back, grab 2 shields from my opponent in this matchup, but instead they go for a catch, but they are unsuccessful. I react in time. I connect with the Rock Tomb. That's super effective damage, and our switch timers are so misaligned that now I'm able to switch into my Azumarill, and this is an extremely dominant matchup. The only more dominant matchup is maybe a Carbink into a Mandibuzz, but a Snarl Mandibuzz into an Azumarill is an absolutely abysmal matchup. They have to go for just a very bad move in Aerial Ace there, but now I'm going to be able to connect with an Ice Beam. This is super effective damage. It actually doesn't quite pick up the knockout, but that just gives more farm to the Azumarill, so I will just commit to the full bubble farm down. They don't even get me into the yellow health range, and now in comes a Dugong as their third. So we've seen this team in seasons past with Marowak plus Dugong, But now in comes the Scizor. We get a slight energy lead, and their Marowak is already a little chipped. And this is exactly what I needed, because now I can just come in with my Scizor, get the full Bullet Punch farm down, come out with nearly back-to-back Trailblazes, and because Ice Shard is resisted, I'm going to get there before my opponent can farm me down. There's Trailblaze number 1. Here comes Trailblaze number 2. It's already boosted. It is super effective damage from a Shadow Scizor. It picks up the knockout on the Dugong, and we are able to take that win. Into next match, we've got Shadow Scizor into Primeape. Now this is a bit of an awkward lead, and there's no really good way to play it out other than just 2 shielding through the Primeape. Our fast move does so much more damage, but they have a pacing advantage in this matchup. However, it doesn't really matter. We can still bait with a Night Slash. This is resisted damage, but a Shadow Scizor from that range probably picks up the knockout with the Night Slash. They are going to commit the shield and then grab that shield right back. Are they going to let me farm me down? Of course not. They're going to come in with a Lapras, which allows me to overfarm because Psywave is resisted. I can now connect with a Trailblaze. Trailblaze actually grabbed a shield from my opponent, so in comes the Credilli. I know I can live an Ice Beam here, no problem, so I'm not too worried about it. They end up going for a Sparkling Aria, which tells me they're actually on Skull Bash, which means I'm just going to go for the Grass Knot right away to pick up the knockout before they make it to a second Sparkling Aria. The opponent ends up living on 1 HP, and actually was a CMP tie, but that is okay. Credilli can still live that, get the acid farm down, but no, my opponent actually pivots into a Clodsire. Now, the reason I'm going for Rock Tomb as opposed to a Grass Knot here is because that way I can comfortably survive 2 Sludge Bombs or 2 Earthquakes on my Azumarill. Looks like my opponent might be lagging, but they're actually back now. We did get quite a few bubbles there that we probably shouldn't have gotten through had my opponent not been lagging. That said, I'm now at 100 energy. Going to be chipping with the Ice Beam. That puts the Clodsire into the red health range. Can we get the full bubble farm down? Looks like not quite. I'm forced to throw energy here before the opponent is able to get to a Rage Fist, because I don't want a Rage Fist to put me in range where an Earthquake would knock out, especially now that they've reset the debuff of the Rock Tomb. Let's see how much an Earthquake does on the Azumarill. It does absolutely nothing. We get the bubble farm down of the Clodsire, and that 1 HP Lapras in the back has nowhere to go, so they will just resign the match. Into the final match, I believe, of the video, we've got Shadow Scizor into Jumpluff. Now, this is a decent lead because Fairy Winds are resisted, and Energy Ball is double resisted, so they're forced to go for either Aerial Ace or Acrobatics in this matchup, and guess what? Pretty much every single one of them baits, so I'm just going to let this go. I'm expecting the bait, but they actually full send the Acrobatics. They get the Fairy Wind farm down, and now I'm in a really difficult situation. But yes, I have just completely thrown away my sweeper. That said, I can come in with Credilli. I will shield up an Acrobatics. I'm expecting that my opponent is just double nuke Jumpluff because they're the non-shadow. Can I get the full farm down? It looks like not quite. Forced to catch the Acrobatics on the Azumarill, which is just a little bit bulkier. Gonna go for the bubble farm down, but no, my opponent is not gonna give me that farm down. Instead, they're gonna come in with Lapras. So my opponent has switch advantage and shield advantage, and we are in a very difficult situation, and I'm not sure how we're gonna get out of this one. That said, Skull Bash will not be enough to pick up the knockout, and this opponent appears to not be on Skull Bash. They're on Ice Beam plus Sparkling Aria, so I can live both charge moves here. I can bank that for later, come in with my Credilli. I can connect it with a Rock Tomb. I'm going to go for an Undercharge, allowing me to get the Acid farm down, but my opponent doesn't want to give me that farm down. Instead, they're going to come in with their third, which is a Shadow Typhlosion. They've thrown 1 Incinerate, but it takes 3 to get to the Blast Burn. So we, fortunately, have a pacing advantage in this matchup. They do get to the Blast Burn. I will respect this because there's not really any point in baiting for my opponent. Throwing a Thunder Punch doesn't let you get to the Blast Burn any faster on the second time around, so there's no point for them to bait. They do end up baiting, and then they just throw right away because they knew I'd be able to outpace, which is a bit of a strange play because Thunder Punch is resisted. It's double debuff. It's never going to be enough to pick up the knockout. Maybe they're hoping they can chip it into range where they can fast move farm me down, but that's just not the case. Acid will get the farm down of the Lapras, and the 1 HP Jumpluff gets farmed down as well, and we are able to take that win. So yeah, that's Shadow Scizor, pretty much as expected. This Pokemon is an absolute beast. Yes, there are some Pokemon that give it trouble. We saw Fortress, we saw Moltres, we saw Talonflame, we saw, not Skarmory, Corviknight. There's a lot of Pokemon that definitely give this Pokemon trouble, especially because there are people hunting this Pokemon because it's so prevalent in the Open Great League right now. However, as you've seen in these matchups, I mean, I climbed maybe about 100 elo back up. I'd fallen quite a bit, but I climbed about 100 elo back up just because this Pokemon is so good. But yeah, that's going to be it for me from this video. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, peace.